Imagine being the most feared, undefeated monster in boxing history, only to lose everything in a single night. Then completely walking away from the ring to become a penniless street preacher, only to return 20 years later to accomplish the impossible. It stands as the ultimate warning to anyone who dares to count out raw determination. Our story begins in 1960s Houston, where a young George Foreman is trapped in a world of desperate poverty. His family is so broke that his mother has to split a single, thin hamburger four ways just to keep her children from starving. At school, the humiliation is unyielding. Classmates relentlessly mock his ragged clothes, weaponizing his poverty until a deep, explosive rage takes root inside him. George learns to silence the laughter with his fists, launching into brutal street fights that put him on a direct collision course with prison. Desperate for an escape, a teenage George joins the Job Corps program. Yet, his fury tags along. After a violent brawl lands him in a high-speed police chase, forcing him to hide beneath a house, coating himself in raw sewage to mask his scent from tracking K9s, George encounters a veteran counselor named Doc Broaddus. Doc recognizes the terrifying, natural power in the boy's hands and offers an ultimatum. Channel that absolute destruction into a ring with rules, or let it destroy your life. The transition is brutal. When George first spars, disciplined fighters circle him effortlessly, exploiting his wild, impulse-driven swings with sharp, blinding jabs. But George adapts with frightening speed. He tames his wild instincts, masters the strategic science of the sport, and unleashes a calculated version of the monster within. Just 1 year later, at the 1968 Mexico City Olympics, George tears through the international bracket to capture a gold medal for his country. Now a professional powerhouse, George evolves into an unstoppable force. In 1973, he steps into the ring in Jamaica against the undefeated, terrifying heavyweight champion, Joe Frazier. The world expects a grueling war of attrition. Instead, George delivers absolute devastation, uncorking a ferocious uppercut that literally lifts Frazier off his feet. George drops the champion 6 times in less than 6 minutes to claim the throne. With global fame and millions of dollars pouring in, George's ego eclipses his roots. He buys sprawling mansions, amasses a fleet of luxury cars, and grows cold toward his family, arrogantly dismissing his mother's religious devotion. But the lavish facade quickly fractures. The temptation of a champion's lifestyle tears his marriage apart, leaving him isolated at the very top. Then comes 1974, the historic rumble in the jungle against Muhammad Ali. George enters the humid arena in Zaire as the suffocating, heavy favorite. But Ali deploys the ultimate psychological trap, the rope-a-dope. Ali leans back against the ropes, absorbing George's body-shattering artillery while taunting him to throw more. George swings with everything he has, completely draining his own gas tank. By the 8th round, a severely exhausted George is left completely defenseless, allowing Ali to land a lightning-fast combination that sends the giant crashing to the canvas. It is George's very first defeat, and his entire identity shatters. George tries to claw his way back, but the spiritual fire is gone. Following an agonizing, heat-stroke-fueled loss to Jimmy Young in 1977, George collapses in a sweltering locker room. His heart stops. He slips into a terrifying, pitch-black void of absolute nothingness. In pure desperation, he screams out into the darkness, pleading with God for his life. Suddenly, George gasps back to consciousness, shocking the medical staff. He walks out of that room a completely transformed man, announcing his immediate and permanent retirement from boxing. George gets baptized, swaps his boxing gloves for a microphone, and begins street preaching on concrete corners. He pours what little money he has left into opening a youth community center in Houston to shield vulnerable kids from the streets. Even when he reunites with a joking Muhammad Ali, George remains at total peace, completely broke, but truly happy. Until decades later, when the lights suddenly snap off across the youth center. George uncovers a crushing betrayal. His longtime financial manager has gambled away every single penny of his fortune on high-risk stocks. The bank threatens immediate repossession. The youth center is on the brink of closure, and the neighborhood kid's face being thrown back onto the streets. With his back pressed firmly against the wall, it was time to stage the most improbable comeback the world had ever seen. George looks in the mirror. He is 38 years old, severely overweight, and has not thrown a competitive punch in 10 long years. The sports media laughs, mocking his bald head and heavy frame. But George is no longer fueled by the toxic hatred of his youth. He is fighting to protect his community. He reunites with an initially reluctant Doc, endures grueling road work, and begins knocking out fighters half his age. To fund his gym, he swallows his pride and signs onto a quirky commercial deal for a fat-reducing grill, a gamble that captures the public's imagination. Finally, in 1994, a 45-year-old George Foreman secures a title shot against the 26-year-old undefeated champion, Michael Moorer. For 9 rounds, Moorer's youthful speed dominates the ring, turning George's face into a swollen, bloody mask. But George remains patient, calculating the timing. In the 10th round, George suddenly plants his feet and unleashes a flawless, short right cross straight to Moorer's chin. Sweat sprays into the front row as Moorer drops like stone, flat on his back, unable to beat the count. Defying every mathematical and physical boundary of aging, George Foreman becomes the oldest heavyweight champion in boxing history. As the arena explodes into pure chaos, George walks back to his corner, falls to his knees, and bows his head in silent prayer, proving to the world that his legacy wasn't forged by the violence in his fists, but by the unyielding strength of his conviction. Hit that subscribe button if this legendary comeback inspired you, and drop a comment below. Who do you think staged the greatest comeback in sports history? Let me know, and I'll see you in the next one.